They say the end of something big comes quietly. But that night, it ended with silence that screamed. We were supposed to be celebrating. I had just returned from pitching my startup idea, ThriveWell, a wellness app that used AI to track mental health patterns, to a panel of investors at a local accelerator. I didn't win funding, but I got applause, 3 follow-up meetings, and a comment from a judge that still echoed in my head. You've got something special here. Let anyone dilute it. But when I walked into our apartment, buzzing with adrenaline and excitement, Liam didn't even look up from his phone. No call. No message. I asked gently, putting my laptop bag down. He shrugged. I figured you'd be busy. I was. That pitch went. I paused, realizing I was the only one excited. You didn't even ask how it went. He tossed his phone on the couch and stood, walking into the kitchen like he didn't hear me. Look, Nora, he said, pouring water into a glass. I didn't want to ruin the night, but I think we should talk. My stomach sank. Nothing good ever starts with, we should talk. Okay, I said slowly, cautiously. About what? He took a breath, the kind people take before they deliver news they've already rehearsed. You're different lately. Obsessed. Everything's about ThriveWell. I feel like I'm dating a startup, not a person. I blinked. Liam, this is my dream. I know. And dreams are fine, he said quickly. But yours is all-consuming. You don't have time for us anymore? You cancel dates, skip movies, miss my family dinners. Because I'm building something, I said, my voice rising. You knew I was in this phase. I told you from the beginning, this is what it takes. He looked at me for a long second. His eyes, once warm and playful, now guarded. I just don't think we're compatible anymore, he said. You're too ambitious. I swear the room tilted. The word stung more than it should have. Too ambitious. I repeated, laughing in disbelief. Since when is that a crime? It's not a crime, he said, voice low. But it's exhausting. I want a partner, not a competitor. That did it. You don't want a partner, I snapped. You want a cheerleader for your dreams while I play small? He didn't deny it. Instead, he just said, you'll never stop chasing things, Nora. And I want peace. A simple life. A future that doesn't feel like a constant hustle. The words echoed, hollow and cold. You'll never stop chasing. Things I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But I didn't either. I stood there in that quiet kitchen with the walls that held our framed memories. Our wine-stained rug and our once happy life, and I realized I didn't belong in it anymore. Not with him. Not with someone who saw my fire and tried to smother it. I packed my things that night. He didn't stop me. He didn't fight for me. And I didn't cry until I was at my best friend Sasha's apartment, curled up on her couch, holding a glass of cheap red wine like it was a lifeline. He said you were too ambitious. She asked, appalled. I nodded, voice thick. Like that was a flaw. Like chasing something big made me unlovable. Sasha shook her head. Girl, that man's ego couldn't handle your future. That's not on you, but deep down, it's still hurt. Because Liam wasn't just a boyfriend, he was part of the life I thought I was building. The safe space I came home to when pitches failed. The person I wanted to celebrate with when things worked. And now he was just gone. And all I had left was an unfinished business plan, a maxed out credit card, and a hole in my chest. The next morning, I sat on Sasha's tiny balcony, watching the city wake up, sipping burnt coffee from a chipped mug. My laptop was open on my lap. I stared at the logo I'd designed months ago. ThriveWell, the dream I had named, nurtured. Shaped. And for a brief second, I almost closed it forever, almost. Then I thought of that judge's words. Don't let anyone dilute it. And I thought of Liam's words. You'll never stop chasing things. He meant it as a weakness. I decided to make it my weapon. I wrote one sentence at the top of my whiteboard. Build it so big they regret leaving. Not for revenge. Not entirely, but because if I didn't believe in myself now when no one else did, I'd never make it. So I began again, with trembling fingers and a broken heart. I began again. The thing no one tells you about starting over is how quiet. It is no applause, no check-ins. Just the sound of your own breath and the dull hum of your laptop fan at 2 a.m. that first week after moving out of Liam's apartment. I crashed at Sasha's place. She had a second bedroom, bare walls, no curtains, and a mattress on the floor. But to me, it felt like both a graveyard and a greenhouse. The death of something safe. The birth of something unknown. I ate instant noodles for dinner, woke up early to apply for grants, slept late writing pitch decks. I cried, too. Not just over Liam, but over the quiet truth that I'd spent years tying my worth to someone who couldn't see my light without flinching. But every morning, I got up because I had something bigger than heartbreak now. I'll never forget the lowest point. It was a rainy Thursday. I had exactly $134.60 in my account. I'd just gotten a rejection email from an angel investor who said, "Love your vision, but we don't think the market's ready for a woman-led wellness AI." I sat in a coffee shop, laptop open, watching a young couple at the next table laugh over croissants. I hadn't laughed in days. Just then, Sasha texted me, "Don't quit. The world needs ThriveWell, even if the world doesn't know it yet." I stared at that message like it was a life raft. Then I opened my email again, sent 20 cold pitches to new VCs, founders, mentors, anyone. One replied, just one. Her name was Marissa Day, a woman who had built her own startup from a garage into a multi-million-dollar health tech brand. Her reply was simple: "I see potential. Come pitch it in person." I didn't have money for a new outfit, so I wore a black turtleneck, jeans, and borrowed heels from Sasha that were half a size too small. I practiced my pitch until my voice cracked. Marissa's office was sleek, high-rise with windows overlooking the bay. She didn't offer fake smiles. She didn't blink much. But when I finished my demo, she leaned forward and said, "Your idea isn't good. It's urgent. You're not just building an app, you're building the next voice in women's digital wellness." She didn't offer money that day, but she handed me a card. "Apply to Torch, our early-stage founder accelerator. I'm on the board. You're ready?" And just like that, the ground beneath me stopped shaking. Torch became the furnace that rebuilt me. 12 weeks of pitch refinement, business boot camps, and nights I cried in the bathroom from imposter syndrome only to walk back into the room and present anyway. But for the first time, I wasn't alone. There were other women, other builders, other outcasts, stern founders. They didn't roll their eyes when I said ambitious. They nodded and said same. One night, we were asked to write a personal mantra and say it out loud. I stood in front of that room, hand trembling. Voice tight, Nan said, "I am not too much. I am exactly enough for the dream I'm building." They clapped. And I cried. But it wasn't pain this time. It was release. By the time Torch ended, ThriveWell had a prototype, a wait list of 400 users, and its first $25,000 in pre-seed capital. I used every cent, wisely brought on a developer part-time, hired a UX designer, and built our first MVP. Was it perfect? No, but it worked. And so did I. I spent 10 hours a day refining the product, another for building our community, and weekends packing wellness kits to send to early testers. Somewhere along the way, people started paying attention. Not the big press. Not yet. But whispers in Slack channels, mentions on Twitter, a small blog titled "The Quiet Storm in Wellness Tech." ThriveWell might be what burnt-out women have been waiting for. I read that headline 20 times. Then I printed it, taped it to my bedroom wall, and circled the word storm, because that's what I had become. Not lightning, not thunder, but a slow, steady storm changing the landscape while no one was looking. And then, one day, I got a notification. "Marissa Day shared your post. She had reposted my soft launch announcement with the caption, "I've watched this founder from the ground up. Invest in her before she builds without you." I stared at it, hands over my mouth. It wasn't just validation. Within 72 hours, I got 6 emails from potential partners, 2 from investors, flew from investors, and 1 from a global wellness panel requesting me as a speaker. Me, the girl who was too ambitious, the girl who cried on a borrowed mattress, the girl who got left behind for dreaming too loud. I sat on the floor that night with a cup of tea, phone buzzing, calendar filling, and I whispered, "You haven't seen anything yet." Success didn't arrive with fireworks. It crept in like sunrise, steady and undeniable. It started with a new office space. Nothing fancy. It's just 2 rooms above a yoga studio that smelled faintly of lavender and incense. But it was ours. It's a whiteboard on every wall, a kettle in the corner, and a sign on the door that said ThriveWell HQ, powered by Purpose. I had a team now: Melissa, my developer, who was a genius with code and memes; Jordan, our UX designer with post-its in every color and more vision than sleep; and me, still making coffee runs, answering emails at 2 a.m., pitching with trembling hands. But growing more grounded by the day. We weren't changing the world yet, but the people using our app were changing their lives. I remember the first DM I got from a user named Vanessa. "Your app helped me track my anxiety patterns. I caught my burnout before it got worse. Thank you." I read it 3 times, then forwarded it to the team with the subject line, This is why." By the end of that quarter, we hit 1OK users. Then came the blog features, the niche podcasts, a speaking invite to an all-women founder summit in Seattle. It wasn't viral. It wasn't loud, but it was real. And real was more than enough. Still, I didn't post much about it on social media. Not because I was hiding, but because I was building. Quietly, relentlessly. I wanted the product to speak before I did. One day, Sasha and I were having lunch on a rooftop downtown retreat. "You realize you're becoming someone," she said between bites of sushi. I laughed. "You make it sound dramatic." It is. Few months ago, you were crying into cereal. Now people are quoting your words on LinkedIn. I rolled my eyes, barely. Then her face shifted. "Do you know who followed me on Instagram yesterday?" I shook my head, Liam. My chopsticks froze midair. "He's still lurking?" I asked, surprised more than hurt. She shrugged. "People love watching what they gave up, especially when it starts to glow." I didn't reply, but something inside me stirred. Not anger, not longing, just awareness. A few weeks later, I was invited to speak on a local founder panel, Tech Disruptors Under 30 edition. The venue was a glassy, modern conference center. Rows of seats, panel chairs with little name cards, bottled water on every table. I sat between 2 founders I had followed for years. One of them turned to me during mic check and whispered, "Hey, I've heard about ThriveWell. Really solid product." I smiled politely, but inside I was screaming. The panel went well. I shared my journey, the failures, the silence, the nights of doubt, and how the loudest thing I'd ever done was keep going when no one clapped. When it ended, I stepped down from the stage, and that's when I saw him, Liam, standing near. The back, he looked almost the same, hands in his pockets, that crooked smile. Except this time, he looked unsure. Our eyes met. He walked up slowly. "I didn't know you were." "You," he said. "What does that mean?" I asked, a little amused. "You're that Nora?" he asked. "From ThriveWell?" "I'm not sure what that means," I replied calmly. "But yes, I'm the founder." He gave a breathy laugh. "Wow, I've been seeing posts, articles. You've really grown." "I have," I said simply. He hesitated. Then softly, "I've actually been looking into the health tech space, trying to make a shift. I left my job a while back." I nodded, silent. Then he said it, so casual, like we were still close. So, are you guys hiring? For a moment, I just looked at him. The man who once told me I was too much, too driven, too focused, too wild with my dreams, doubt now standing in front of me, asking if he could join the very thing I built from the ashes of his doubt. The irony wasn't lost on me. But I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just said, you can apply through our hiring portal. His face faltered a little, like he expected something warmer, familiar. But I wasn't his Nora anymore that night. I sat in our office alone. The team had left. The city lights blinked in the distance. My inbox was overflowing, and so was my heart. I remembered the Nora who cried herself to sleep with ramen on her lap. The Nora who shook during her first pitch deck. The Nora who watched the man she loved walk away because he couldn't handle her light. Now, she didn't dim for anyone. 2 days after the panel, Liam submitted his application under a fake last name. Like I wouldn't recognize the resume. Like I wouldn't remember the man who once said startups burn people out. Why not? Just be happy. He applied for the operations associate role, an entry-level position meant for people looking to grow into leadership over time. It was ironic, really. I'd designed that position with mentorship in mind, a stepping stone for hungry, humble people. I stared at his CV on my screen. It was average. Nothing terrible, but nothing that screamed initiative either. Just a list of safe jobs, generic responsibilities, and a short note in the cover letter. I'm passionate about purpose-driven tech and AM. Eager to grow within a company that aligns with my values. Values. I almost laughed. Should we interview him? Jordan asked. I didn't answer right away. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vindictive. Was simply ... curious what he'd say to me. Now that the power balance had shifted. Schedule it, I said quietly. But I'll take it myself. He showed up in a navy button-down shirt. It's the same leather shoes he used to wear to dinner dates. His smile flickered when he saw me seated, alone in the glass-walled meeting room. He looked older, more tired, and clearly unprepared for what this was about to be. Hi, Nora, he said cautiously, extending a hand. I shook it briefly and gestured to the seat across from me. So, I began, professionally. You're applying for our ops associate role. He cleared his throat. Yes, I know it might seem odd, but I've been following Thrivewell for a while. You're doing amazing things. I gave a polite nod. Thanks. We're proud of our growth. He fidgeted with his sleeve. I didn't know it was your company at first, but when I realized ... I felt like I had to reach out. This is our standard interview, I said, keeping my voice even. Let's keep it that way. He blinked. Right? Of course. I asked him the usual questions about systems, workflow, problem solving. His answers were fine. Surface level, safe. Then I leaned forward slightly and asked, tell me, about a time you underestimated someone and what you learned from it. His breath caught. There it was, a flicker of guilt. His lips parted like he wanted to confess, maybe apologize. But instead, he chose the detour. I guess I used to believe that ambition made people difficult to be around, that too much drive meant a person wasn't balanced. And now? I asked, tone still neutral. He looked me straight in the eye. Now I think I was intimidated, especially by people who chased their dreams harder than I was willing to chase. Mine, it wasn't an apology, but it was close. Still, I kept my face unreadable. The interview ended with a handshake. I thanked him for his time, gave him a generic response about our hiring timeline, walked him to the elevator. He hesitated before stepping in. I know I probably don't deserve a second chance, he said. But it's inspiring. What? You've built. I simply nodded. Best of luck, Liam. And the doors closed. Back at my desk, I stared at his application one last time, then deleted it. Not out of spite, out of certainty. Because you don't rebuild yourself from the ashes just to invite back the person who lit the match. That night, I stayed late in the office. The city buzzed below, the hum of potential in the air. I pulled out a pen and wrote something on a sticky note, a reminder to myself. You are not someone's what if. You are your own. Why not? I stuck it on the inside of my laptop. Then I opened a new deck for our series. A pitch, because there was still more to build. And I wasn't done rising. A week passed, no follow-up emails. No thank you note. Just silence. I assumed Liam had gotten the message. I wasn't sure what he expected. Redemption. Closure. Us. A second chance at a front row seat to something he once walked out on. But I had moved on mostly than my assistant. Knocked on my door one morning and handed me a plain white envelope. He dropped this off earlier. Said it was personal. There was no return address. No note. Just my name on the front in Liam's familiar handwriting. I stared at it for a long moment before opening it. Inside was a letter, typed, thoughtfully written, and far more honest than I was prepared for. Nora, I don't expect you to forgive me. When I ended things with you, I didn't know I was projecting my own fears onto your fire. Watching you speak on that stage, watching people lean in when you talked, made me realize something painful. I left you because I was afraid of being left behind. I told myself you were too ambitious when the truth is, I never dared to dream that big myself. I didn't believe in your vision. But worse, I didn't believe in mine. I've been floundering ever since, trying to find meaning, direction, and it led me back to the place where I once turned away. Not because I want to take from what you've built, but because I want to understand how someone like you keeps building even when no one claps. Even if this is the last time we speak, I want to say this. You were never too much. I was never enough for the woman you were becoming. I hope you keep rising. Liam, I folded the letter slowly. There was no rush of satisfaction, no smug sense of revenge, just peace. And something else I hadn't expected, a strange quiet ache. Because this was the version of him I'd always hoped would show up. But now, it was just a page I had already turned. That night, I had dinner with my team. A small celebration. We'd crossed 50,000 users. We toasted with cheap champagne and Chinese. Takeout. Melissa raised her glass to Nora, the only founder I know who gets VCs and wellness influencers in the same inbox. Everyone laughed, but I just smiled quietly and said, to us, and to every door that closed so this one could open. They clinked their glasses. No one asked for context, but I felt it in my chest like a chapter had finally, fully ended. The next morning, I opened LinkedIn. Liam had posted something, a photo of a sunrise and a caption that read, "Sometimes the people we envy are the ones we once walked away from. Learn from them, don't repeat the mistake." It didn't tag me, but it didn't need to. The world knew who had kept going. I didn't write Liam back right away, not because I was angry, because I wasn't sure what to say to someone who had finally found the words I waited years to hear, when I no longer needed to hear them. But 3 days later, I found myself at the old Lee. I folded the letter, tucked it into my journal, and left it there. He would never read it. But maybe it was never really for him. 2 days later, I stood on a stage in San Francisco at a wellness tech summit. This time, there were hundreds of people, investors, mentors, founders behind me. A massive screen projected my name and logo, and in the front row was Marissa Day, nodding like a proud older sister. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't use slides. I just stood there, looked out at the crowd and said, "A year ago, I was told I was too ambitious to be loved. Today, I'm telling you, your ambition is not a flaw. It is a compass. Follow it even when it leads you away from everything familiar, especially then." The crowd was silent for a moment. Then the applause began, loud, real, echoing later. That evening, I got a text from Sasha. "Just saw your clip trending on Twitter. 200K views already. You're everywhere." I smiled, then opened my email. A message had just come in from a top-tier VC I'd pitched months ago. Subject line, "Let's talk." I closed my laptop, looked out at the city lights and whispered, "To no one, They said I was too ambitious. They had no idea I was just getting started. 1 year later, we crossed 500,000 users last month. We raised our Series A funding $4.3 million, led by one of the top female-run venture firms in the country. ThriveWell had grown from an idea on a Ramen-fueled night to a movement now. I walked into rooms where people already knew my name. They quoted my words, they followed my company, and more importantly, they believed in what we were building. I should have felt overwhelmed, but I didn't. I felt ready one afternoon as I was preparing for an industry roundtable in New York. Sasha texted me a screenshot. It was a photo of Liam on LinkedIn. New role, junior ops at a small startup. I smiled, not out of spite, out of relief. He was building now too. Maybe on a smaller scale, maybe at a different speed. But he had found a new beginning, just like I had. The roundtable panel was in a grand ballroom filled with chandeliers and people who had once ignored my emails. Now, May leaned forward when I spoke. I told the story, not the petty version, the real one. How I'd been told I was too ambitious. How I was left. How I learned to trust the silence, the no's, the overlooked pitches. How I built, anyway. After the panel, a young woman approached me. Barely 20, with trembling hands and notebook pages full of dreams. She said, "Everyone tells me I need to be realistic, that my startup is too idealistic. But hearing you, I don't feel crazy anymore." I took her hands and smiled. "You're not crazy. You're early." Her eyes welled up. And right then, I realized this was the moment I had fought for. Not headlines, not funding rounds, not LinkedIn applause, but becoming the woman I once needed to meet. Later that night, back in my hotel room, I found the old letter I'd written to Liam Still tucked in my journal. I reread it, then quietly tore it in half. Piece by piece, not in anger, unrelease. I didn't need to hold on to the past to remember what it taught me. My phone buzzed. A new follower request on Instagram. Liam. I paused, then hit ignore. Not to be cruel, but because some stories don't need a sequel. I stood by the window, looking at the skyline. This was the life I built from heartbreak, silence, rejection, and grit. A startup born from ambition. A woman rebuilt from ashes, and a legacy lit by a fire no one could dim again. Success changes the way people treat you. Suddenly, the world that once looked away is watching, listening, clapping, but the truth. The applause means less than the silence I survived. I was never fueled by validation. I was fueled by the quiet days, the no's, the doors that slammed and the ones that never opened. And the one door I had to close myself, Liam. It had been 18 months since our last conversation. I hadn't spoken to him, hadn't seen him in person. Then one evening, while hosting a small founder dinner in LA, I heard a voice behind me say I almost didn't come. I turned. It was him, Liam, dressed well, softer eyes. No ego in his voice this time, just presence. I gave a polite smile. "Didn't know you were invited." He chuckled awkwardly. "Last minute. My mentor brought me as a +1. Realize you'd be here until I walked in. How's your new role?" I asked calmly. He nodded. "Good. Humbling. I'm learning how to be part of something without needing to lead it." That surprised me, but not enough to open any old doors. He hesitated before continuing. "You've really built something, Nora. Something that mattered." "Still building?" I said. "Always." Then a pause. A long one. "I never deserved to be next to you," he said finally. "But for what it's worth, I'm glad someone got to be." It wasn't romantic. It wasn't desperate. It was the kind of closure you don't expect, but somehow. I smiled gently. "So am I." Then someone called my name across the room, an investor from Berlin I'd been trying to meet for months. I turned back to Liam and said the last words I'd ever say to him. "Take care of your fire. Don't let fear put it out again." He nodded, and I walked away. That night, stood on the rooftop alone. The city lights stretched for miles. I thought about every version of me that had led to this one. The girl who was told to be smaller, the woman who chose to expand instead, the founder who learned that ambition wasn't arrogance, it was alignment. And I realized something. The doors we close behind us don't just lock out others. They free us to walk forward fully unchained. Weeks later, I got a call. Forbes wanted to feature ThriveWell in their 30 Under 30 Women Redefining Wellness issue when they interviewed me. The final question was, what's one thing you would tell the girl who got left because she was too ambitious? I smiled and said, you were never too much. You were just ahead of your time. Now look around, your time is here.